Tomorrow, a Federal Reserve Committee will meet to talk over a possible interest rate cut. But the big question is, will Lisa Cook join her fellow Fed governors for that meeting? For now, Cook remains on the board after a federal judge blocked President Trump's dismissal. And tonight, the Senate is expected to confirm Trump's latest appointment to the Fed board, Stephen Miron. If the vote goes as expected, Miron will join the board in time for this week's meeting. He will not be replacing Cook, though, in case you got that idea. Joining us now, NBC News senior business correspondent Christine Romans and MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin. I asked Christine this last week. Will Lisa Cook be voting for or against a Fed rate cut or to keep it steady? And your answer was yes, it appears she will be, but...
As of 2:39 today, she will be, because she remains a member of the Fed Board of Governors unless and until the D.C. Circuit stays a lower court's order. If they do that, that in effect means that a lower court's decision to reinstate Lisa Cook to her position would no longer be effective, that President Trump could again fire her, and Lisa Cook would have to fight on appeal for reinstatement.
What would the grounds be for them to stay that decision?
Well, a stay is usually based on a variety of factors, one of which is who is more harmed by this decision. In the past, the very recent past, the Supreme Court, weighing sort of similar decisions, has said the executive would be more harmed than the displaced individual who is losing their position in the government. That's not a position that I expect the D.C. Circuit to take here, particularly where the statute is so clear. The statute authorizing the Fed says that a Fed member can only be fired for cause. That statute's been interpreted to mean cause existing while the person is already serving on the Fed, not for things that happen beforehand.
Do we have any more on the allegations that Trump has levied against her that make her dismissal or her removal or a stay on this more relevant than it was a couple weeks ago?
Well, there's been some new reporting that when Lisa Cook applied for one of the mortgages at issue, she listed that home explicitly as a vacation home. But that's not part of the issue that the circuit court is deciding. That has not been made part of the record in the court proceedings that the D.C. Circuit will consider today. So it's out in the world of public opinion. Certainly makes it more plausible that Lisa Cook made an inadvertent error. But is that something these three judges will have to weigh today? No.
All right. We do have breaking news. Just moments ago, the Federal Appeals Court does not allow Donald Trump to remove Lisa Cook from her post. I'll just read from the order. Upon consideration of the emergency motion for stay pending appeal and administrative stay, the oppositions thereto, and the reply, the motion for leave to participate as amicus curiae filed by the Separation of Powers Clinic and the Lodge. Yes. This is the order. The motions for leave to participate as amicus curiae be granted. The clerk is directed to file the amicus briefs. They go down. This is Judge Childs, Circuit Judge Garcia, joined by Judge Childs. They note about that Trump said he found cause. They talk about how the district court issued its preliminary injunction, and then they go on to underscore that, again, Donald Trump will not be able to remove her. As we'll comb through this a little more, can you just give us your hot take on this?
This is a movie we've seen before many times, actually, right? Trump tries to fire an independent person. The district court says, no, you can't do that. The appeals court says the district court got this right. No, you can't do that. The next step here is the administration presumably is going to rush to the Supreme Court, say we have an emergency. Can you put a stay on this order? And what the Supreme Court does is anyone's guess, to my mind. They put in so many stays that they shouldn't have put in place to help the Trump administration that it would not surprise me if they put in a stay here as well. Hopefully they know that they should not do that. They seem to have recognized that the Fed would be a particularly problematic third rail for them to touch. But that is, I think, where we're headed here. We'll see what the administration does.
And this means tomorrow, when the Fed starts meeting about what to do about interest rates, Lisa Cook will be there, and presumably this guy from the White House will also be there, and we will see if President Trump continues to bully or figure out a way to push more of
a
them.
key line from this court.
When you say we will see that, how will we see that?
We might
when
see
will it be obvious to us?
Well, there's always the 2 a.m. Trump social posts about some new allegation. But I think that's the question of how the Fed decides about whether to cut rates and how much. I think many people are just no longer assuming that it is not partially driven by politics and the era of Fed independence, I think, is over now.
Michael,
Looks like
the order says.
looks like she will have company, right?
Oh, yes. We can confirm that Myron has been confirmed by the Senate while the show has been happening. Key line from the order: given that Cook has a property interest in her position, she is entitled to some kind of process before removal. The court is saying in this order, you just cannot dismiss people by social media posts. You have to have a process. And they are siding with Lisa Cook, saying she deserves that process, and she is now going to get it.
Well, let's see what kind of process they create.
Yeah, because some kind of is in quotes from the judges themselves.
They're
in
not
this
saying
order.
an evidentiary hearing. They're saying some process.
Some process.
And I think that might be an invitation for some.
Elucidate that. For what could that look like?
Well, I don't know. I hate to speculate based on an opinion I haven't read just yet. But I don't know. An internal process could look like something like an internal sort of administrative tribunal, not an actual tribunal, but present some allegations. You get an opportunity to respond. There's sort of some internal referee. But I don't know what a fair process would look like in this administration, given everything that they've done so far. I mean, they've already made clear that they're not particularly interested in a fair process. They're interested in a political outcome.
I want to go back to Simone's core argument, though, which is the only action we have seen is when someone actually makes the choice to stand up, to push back, and to fight, even if that comes at great personal expense, even if that creates personal exhaustion.
And that's been the tale of the tape for the very few law firms that push back, the very few individuals in the federal government that have pushed back, the universities that have pushed back. There is value in standing your ground on principle, on the principle that there is a process, there's a legitimate legal process, there are economic realities.
News to contradict the Trump administration's mortgage fraud allegations against Fed Governor Lisa Cook. NBC News looked over Cook's bank records this past week and found no evidence of corruption. President Trump attempted to remove her from her position this summer, but so far, she is refusing to leave. Well, joining me now, we have former federal prosecutor Barrett Berger. Welcome, Barrett. So President Trump, as you know, tried to fire Lisa Cook. That happened back in August. It is the first time a president has attempted to fire a top Fed official. Where did this case come from, and where do you expect it to go from here?
So the case is really concerning whether the president has the power to fire her under the Federal Reserve Act. Now, this act says that governors can only be removed for cause. So the whole question swirling in this case is, what does that mean? And was there cause in this case? So we know that the administration has pointed to alleged mortgage fraud that they claim that Cook committed, not while she was in office, but years ago. And they've pointed to that and said this now gives them the authority to fire her because we have this cause or this alleged criminal activity. So the question for the court now is, can you consider acts that were done before somebody was in office? And even if you can, what kind of due process would Cook deserve? How much does a court get to weigh in on whether these allegations actually would support a finding of cause in the first place?
Can I ask you if it's true, as NBC News has reported, looking over these documents that they show that she identified this home as a second home, a vacation home. She did not seek a lower mortgage rate. She did not seek exemptions, again, according to NBC News reporting. If that gets presented to a judge, does the whole case get thrown out the window?
Yeah, I mean, in order to actually prove mortgage fraud, prosecutors would have to show that she was really intentionally trying to mislead the lender about what she intended to do with the property. So while, again, I don't know that we can definitively say that these documents show that she was fully transparent.
Maybe
or
there are
made the right
others. We don't
disclosures.
know. Right.
Correct. But if they are accurate, and if this, does show that she at least intended to be somewhat transparent about how she wanted to use this property as a vacation home or as a second home, then certainly that would make it almost impossible for prosecutors to put forth some sort of a mortgage fraud case. So to the extent we're looking at whether this now gives the president the authority under the Federal Reserve Act to fire her for cause, I would think that would be much more difficult to make that case in court now.
Money, power, politics. And this evening, all eyes are on the Federal Reserve. The Senate has voted to confirm President Trump's top economic advisor, Stephen Miran, to the Federal Reserve Board, leaving the door open for him to vote on interest rates during the Fed's two-day meeting, which starts tomorrow. Also voting on interest rates, Donald Trump's least favorite governor, Lisa Cook. Earlier this evening, a federal appeals court rejected the president's request to remove her ahead of this week's meeting. With me now, Gillian Tett, columnist and member of the Financial Times editorial board, and Max Chafkin is here, Bloomberg Businessweek journalist, host of Bloomberg's Everybody's Business podcast, the paperback version of his book, The Contrarian, Peter Thiel and the Rise of the Silicon Valley Oligarchs, was just released. All right, let's start with Miran's confirmation.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing this in a bunch of different ways. Donald Trump obviously is trying to exert political pressure on the Fed to basically bring the Fed, I think, more in line with his policy preferences. And that policy preference, as he's made clear over and over again, is drastically lower interest rates. Now, that obviously raises a lot of concerns about inflation, also sort of knock-on effects. What happens if you have a Fed that's not independent? But I think that's what's going on. I think these two stories are basically different sides of the same story.
But with or without Miran, there's a good chance the Fed is going to cut rates on their own. You write that this isn't just about the Fed cutting rates. This is about the president trying to change the mission of the Federal Reserve.
Well, it's very interesting if you look at what someone like Steve Miran and Scott Bessent, the U.S. Treasury Secretary, and some of the actual potential next Fed governors.
Because this is not a man that has perspective or any sort of nuance or tact. Because look, the Supreme Court has largely given him way more than he deserves. But they don't give him absolutely everything. And this applies to the appeals courts as well. And Trump, again, he doesn't understand this stuff. He's going to blame whoever. It's like a scatter shot, and you better just not be in the room when Donald starts throwing the ketchup, right? And is it Clarence, you're going to get ketchuped. Coney Barrett, you're going to get ketchuped. Kavanaugh, you're going to get ketchuped. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter if you actually made the decisions or not. He's just going to keep making these threats and these tantrums. Because he has won many cases he didn't deserve to win. Conservative judges have basically said to him, a lot of them, not everyone, but a lot of them have said, look, we're willing to actually play ball with your quick slide into totalitarianism. We're willing to at least partially acknowledge the imperial presidency, right? Presumably, as soon as a Democrat tries to do what Trump did, they will see new vision in the Constitution and change their mind, of course, as we know. But as it stands right now, they're willing to make Trump the imperial president. But even the emperor, it doesn't have total absolute power. So every once in a while, he loses a case at the circuit or appeal or Supreme Court level, and he has an S-word fit. And it's absolutely insane because he doesn't understand that, one, the courts have to go against him sometimes because judges are politicians. I know people don't want to hear that, but judges are politicians, and they know that they're politicians that are unelected, but their authority in part is still baked into the consent of the people. If the people stop believing in them fully, then that spells the potential end of the dominance of the courts, right? Whether people just start breaking laws or it gives more credence to a future president, a future Congress, to really start meaningfully weakening the Supreme Court. Adding new judges, weakening its absolute authority to interpret law. That only exists because, people accept it. So they have to go against him sometimes. But also, he needs to bring an argument.